Hey, inspired women! The Inspired podcast is designed to have relevant conversations centered around our everyday lives, looking through the lens of the Word of God. Life can be hard to navigate, especially as a Jesus-believing sister, mom, friend, single, or wife. We invite you and welcome you to our table and hope that you're inspired to view God in bigger and more awe-inspiring ways as you walk this journey with Him. Welcome back to the Inspired podcast. Today we're going to be talking about hormones, and I'm Jessica, and I'm joined by Sara and Chloe.
Hello.
Hi. Hey,
What's
girls.
up?
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, man. Women.
Yes.
Yeah, speaking of woman, like I said, we're talking about hormones today. This is,
It's like the
there
core.
can be no
Getting right
more
in there.
womanly thing to talk about than hormones.
Oh, yeah. Oh, for sure.
Do you deal with hormones? Do you deal with hormones?
No, actually, I don't deal with them. They just exist, and
They deal
I'm like,
with-
I'm
They
not
deal
deal-
with me.
Yeah, they deal with me. I'm like, I'm not dealing with that.
Yeah.
But I think we all have experienced what it's like to, it's like to be hormonal. But then, yeah. So
Let's
it's just
go.
something that we've
I'm
all
excited.
gone
I know.
through. Yeah.
Okay,
so.
well, but before we get into that, speaking of hormones and lots of estrogen, we're coming up to the Inspired Conference
Yes,
soon.
ma'am.
I know we talk about this at the beginning of every episode, but we want you there. I mean, we say something about it because we truly, anybody who sits at this table has a deep desire that your bottom will be in one of
Yeah.
these seats.
Yes.
Your
For the Inspired Conference, because it's so important. I've kind of been talking about the Inspired Conference probably all year long, but the closer we get to it, I have conversations with women who just are so excited and say that there's just something interesting about women coming together and getting to worship alongside some of your sisters in Christ, making new friends, hearing the same thing like from the speaker and processing it in very different ways than the person maybe sitting next to you, and allowing God to reveal the different ways that He
Yeah.
works in our individual lives. And so I'm just really excited. But so we are 1 week away from the price increasing.
Yep.
So the fire is now under your
It's
bottom.
time.
This is the second time I've said bottom in just this short amount of time. But the fire is under you now to go register and sign up, and make sure that you tell your friends as well. I don't think we've mentioned this, but there is this really cool feature that we have on the registration page that you can pay for a sister, or at least help a sister out go to the
I love
Inspire
that.
Conference.
Yeah.
I think
So
that you can donate either half a ticket, a whole ticket, or I think you can choose your own amount of like what you want to put towards sending
awesome.
a woman that might not have the means to come. So
Yes. Every year we've provided scholarships, so there definitely are women that want to come and financially can't. So this is a great way for
Yeah.
everyone to just kind of step up and help them get to the conference.
Yeah.
So 1 week until early bird price ends. So get in there and get yourself a deal.
yes.
You're not going to want to miss it.
I'm super stoked.
So, estrogen, high levels of estrogen. This is an interesting topic, and as we were talking about this, preparing for this episode, I really feel like this is a really unique subject. Not only because it's probably the most common denominator that we all have that listen to this podcast, but also to be thinking about it like what this podcast has always intended to do is have conversations filtered through the lens of God's word and our Christian walks and our relationship with Jesus. And sometimes I think it can be easy to separate things like hormones and Jesus because the Bible doesn't address anything about hormones. I don't even think the word hormone existed back then, or we didn't have a scientific knowledge of
Right.
hormones
Yeah.
in the times that the Bible was taking place. But now we do. Science is amazing, and as it has evolved and developed, research continues to come out, informing us about our bodies, our very mysterious bodies, because I know that hormones can be extremely mysterious at different phases of our life.
Yeah.
But I do think that there still is a lot to be said about how to tackle the subject of hormones. And as we were talking, we kind of saw this evolution of hormones being broken up into two camps. because we know that this is a sensitive topic, because there's a lot of emotion that's involved with hormones. And so we kind of want to break these into two groups in saying that there are hormonal milestones, and then there is just the regular times.
Yes.
The hormonal milestones will be things like starting your period, going through puberty, having children, becoming pregnant, having children, and postpartum, and then menopause. And those are kind of the markers and the stakes in which our hormones are probably most in flux. And that's, I mean, just a very scientific fact. And then there's just the in between times where, you know, you might not be going through menopause, but you might not be having children, and you find yourself in that middle time. Or there's even that phase of pre-menopause, right? Or you're just going in between starting your period and going through puberty and having kids. And so the reason I love both of you guys being on here is that we kind of, like many topics, have different experiences in different areas. So I'm gonna punt to Sarah first, because I really want you, because when we were talking about this before, you were bringing up how you don't really even know if you've had a very stable time in your hormones as to date.
Yeah, so I'm 27. I have 3 little girls, 5 and under. So I started having kids when I was 21 and just quit breastfeeding. So I breastfed for, I guess 6.5 years straight. Didn't stop between kids. My girls all have 19 months in between each one. So for all of my adult life, basically, I've been pregnant, nursing, or both. So my hormones, like when I think of hormones, I think of how much they harmed me mentally. Although, of course, they're necessary because they help us get pregnant. They help us produce breast milk. Like they're good in the sense that they like help our bodies do what we were created to do. But for me, just from my perspective, like I didn't have a whole lot of like balanced downtime before I had kids. And now I'm just now on the other side of nursing. So my body still is still coming down from those hormones that like help you breastfeed. So I'm just waiting for that day when I feel like really good and normal.
Is there such a thing? Is there such a thing?
I'm sure no.
Okay, Chloe, you're younger than Sarah and I. So tell us like a little bit of a background of like where you're going to be coming from in this conversation.
Yeah, I think that going into puberty, starting my period, all of those things, it was just a lot of like ups and downs. And then as I kind of like went into adulthood, I started to regulate. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to be normal now. Like I don't have to deal with the teenage hormones and the whatever. And like going through that was a thing in and of itself. But like as an adult, I realized we still have like a hormonal cycle that we go through, and we're still going to be affected by that. It's not like the doctor would be like, yeah, after a few years, you're going to be good and it's going to be regular. I'm like, it's going to be regular, like chaos maybe, but you know, so I think I've just had to learn.
Define regular.
Yeah. I'm like, like normal? Like that's not how it feels. Yeah. So I think like going into adulthood and what that looks like has just been a journey of like really learning about my body and about how it works. And then also like relating that to like how I feel, and then how I can continue to live my life as a Christ follower in a way that honors God even through all of that. So I'm kind of in the phase of like growing up and learning like what it means to just to be a woman really, and to have that regular cycle of, you know, every 4 weeks going through the same ebbs and flows of hormones. So
yeah. I think the interesting thing is that it really, we talked about transitions a few podcast episodes ago, and having hormones and going through a cycle, 28 days or longer or shorter, whatever yours is in and of itself a transition. Right. Because, Chloe, what you were talking about is like, you know, I'm no scientist. And so the things that I was researching, preparing for this podcast, I'm like, I am not even going to attempt to realize, like to regurgitate some of these statistics or scientific facts or whatever. Because there's a whole world out there that you can dive into, medical journals, different research, like all there's just things come out almost every year about hormones. But you were talking about how within a 28-day cycle, there are different phases of your cycle.
Yeah. So that
you use some really big words. Can you repeat those words? I was like, what?
You're like, huh? So
them.
this is something that I've like, because I felt like each week I had a different feeling, different emotions, different whatever. So I was like, am I crazy? Like that, like it doesn't make sense that this week I'm sad, this week I'm happy, best week of my life.
Yes.
And like there's nothing changing around me.
Yeah.
So I kind of was just like, the best way for me to tackle something is to know it and to understand it. So I did research and it's like, oh, so like most women go through a 4-week, like when you're in your, like still in your menstruating age, like childbearing age, a 4-week cycle. So there's the 4 different phases. It's follicular, ovulatory, luteal, and menstrual. So the follicular is right after your period ends. And like this is normally when you start to feel good, you start to feel better, like you're getting like, oh, I feel good. And then ovulatory is when you ovulate, the week when you ovulate. That's when like testosterone is at its highest, like you feel really good, a lot of energy, like best week of the month. And then after that, there's like a big drop. So that's the luteal phase. So like estrogen like drops, progesterone rises, and that makes you feel moodier. It actually elevates cortisol, which is like the stress hormone in your body. And that's like your PMS time. So that's your luteal phase, like when your body's getting ready. And then when you go through the menstrual phase, the progesterone that rises drops, and then estrogen goes higher, and then you menstruate. So then there's obviously all of the things that come along with that, you know, just so it's like you have this like rise and then they switch like all of a sudden 1 week. So like I realized that, and I've tracked my period of like, okay, not only do I know when I'm going to menstruate, but I know like when I'm going to go through the luteal phase, the follicular, you know, all those different things. And that helps me prepare. Even like I know during like my, like the week before my period, I do not want to socialize. I do not want to be out. So I'll plan my schedule around that.
Yeah.
And so just like knowing those phases, like keeping track of them, and not everyone's is the same. Like you might have a longer cycle, but as long as, like, I'm speaking, I guess, if you have a regular menstrual cycle, you know, and birth control can even change these factors too, but, like, you'll go through all of these phases and they completely affect how you feel and even how you see the world. So, like, that's just been a big thing of, like, understanding that for me of, like, okay, each week I need to, like, understand what my body's going through, how that's going to affect how I feel, how I see things, and then also affect how I even schedule my life, or like how I, you know, I'm going to work from home this week because I know I'm going to feel a different type of way. So,
yeah. Well, I like it how you said that. I mean, you dove into that research because I do think that part of our hormone cycle is being self-aware and being in touch and in tune with your body. And I know that sounds sometimes very impossible because you're like, how on earth could I be in touch with my hormones when my feelings and my emotions are changing every week? But I like what you said, because to a certain extent, we have to become curious enough to want to fix our problem. Well, I say problem. That sounds like our hormones are a problem, and sometimes they can be, but they're, for the most part, they're given to us and we have them for a reason. Right. But in order to maybe regulate and bring some regularity to what's going on, it can be helpful to look deeper into, I mean, like the science behind it. There's a reason that I feel this way, or I feel this way. Why? So I'm going to start doing some research. And what you're saying about tracking your periods is just another step to become more self-aware of what's actually the chemistry that's going on inside your body. Because I don't know about you, but when I read articles or whatever that reveal a new piece of scientific evidence, then I'm like, that makes all the sense. Like, now all the dots are connecting. That's why X, Y, and Z. It becomes a freeing thing for me and allows me to give myself a little bit more grace along the journey and whatever that may be.
Yeah. I like that you said that you mentioned having grace for yourself. I feel like being aware of your cycle and what's normal for you, and, well, I guess starting point, what's quote unquote normal. Right. And just having understanding of that and knowledge of that can also help you identify where there might be a problem or like a disruption that's not quote unquote normal. And so, like, for me, I know what a regular cycle should look like, but I haven't had that in years. Like, since I was 20, and I was on birth control at that point. So I don't know that I necessarily have ever had a normal cycle. I know this isn't the case for everyone, but for me, when I'm nursing, I don't have a period.
Right.
And so I've had like 3 periods in the last 7 years, and I've gotten pregnant on that cycle by the, like, I know that, you know, by the grace of God. But, so I'm just now getting to a point now that I'm done nursing where I'm getting a cycle back, and then I have like a really long one, and then a really short one, and a really long one, and a really short one. But my understanding of what that should look like, how those different like aspects might make me feel, is helpful to me, because it almost feels like I can take a little bit more power back and give myself grace for like, oh, this is why you look this way this week of the month, or this is why you feel this way because your cycle's like, it's not quite on track right now. And so the other thing too that I think being aware can help you do is like eat right. I think that has like a big important factor too. Like the week that you're on your period, like you might have like low iron, you might be extra tired. Like those are things that just having knowledge and understanding about, you can gain a little bit more control. Like it's something that's going to happen like automatically within our bodies, and something that like we have a little bit of power to regulate when needed. But if we have no knowledge and understanding, we have no power over it at all. And so I think that's why it can be so easy to spiral down into like a confusing time when things are happening in your body and you don't know why and you don't understand them at all. So I think just, seeking out that knowledge and understanding is a way to just kind of have a little bit more control over it, and like even rely on your body for the way that it should be working. You know what I mean? And just be able to understand that more.
I know every episode we talk in some form or fashion community, and this is coming up in this conversation again, is that this is why community is so important. Because I remember, I mean, I was 24 when I had my first child, and I had like a group of women, but it really wasn't back then. I mean, this is like 13 years ago, 14 years ago. It wasn't that prominent to talk about hormones and be open about that kind of stuff. Or at least in my circles. And so when I had my first child, and I've told people before, I'm a realist. I like to know what's ahead, and I like to be prepared. And I remember sitting in the hospital bed so angry at all my friends, because I feel like nobody prepared me for this roller coaster. And all I knew about having babies was like that you have a little bit of confusing feelings. I know there's this thing called the baby blues afterwards, postpartum, but like, I don't know if I'm going to have that or not. But right now I'm just elated, but also scared and a little confused and ready for things to get back to normal. And the weeks following that postpartum were just some of the most tumultuous times that I've ever had in my life. And I'm typically not a gray skies, glass half empty person. And so to have those feelings and deal with some of those feelings, I was really confused. And I wish I was more equipped, at least like a friend saying, okay, I don't know if you know this, maybe you do, but there is this time period after you're having your kid, and your hormones are going crazy, your estrogen levels are dropping and they're rising, and they're trying to find, their footing. But in all that time, you can reach out to me because I've been there. I know what it feels like. So, and you have your doctors, you have the internet to do some research. So just, I want you to be aware of that. I mean, even just something so simple as that would have been helpful for me. But I do remember that, as the doctor was coming back in and making the rounds and checking on me after I had my firstborn, he said something that I will never forget. And he said, what you need to know about your body right now is that your body went from being pregnant and having all the estrogen that it needed to raise a human to having none at all. So you've gone through menopause essentially in 24 hours. And that made so much sense to me.
That's interesting.
And it gave me the handles for when I was at that breaking point several times after I had my kid of like, pause, my estrogen, I have no estrogen right now, and it will come back, but I'm going to have to be patient along the way. So I think that informing yourself, even having a community of people around you. I mean, like, I know we've even talked about how important it is for community to point out our blind sides. So why don't one of you speak to some of that? I mean, like talking about how we can have people in our life, the Square Squad, people close in your corner that can see things that you might not always say. Because I don't know about you in your experience with hormones, but I feel like hormones put blinders on me. on either side of me that I can't see this way. I can only see tunnel vision. And most of the time that tunnel is dark.
Yeah. I feel like I can definitely speak to that because, I mean, like, that's what it feels like. It feels like very much like, okay, I see this problem. I'm dealing with this. I don't see the outside factors. I don't see all of these things. Like, it becomes reality. So having community is so important. And I've even seen that in my own life of like, hey, I'm going through this right now. And then someone being like, oh yeah, I know what that's like. Like, I just had a conversation with a friend and like, she's been having trouble with her cycles being all of a sudden irregular. And I'm like, when you start a relationship, it can actually throw off your cycle. And she's like, what? I'm like, yeah, like that happened to me. Like when I got into a relationship, it made my period irregular for a couple months. And like again, no idea, like she had no idea, or like she was like, oh, I thought maybe that's what it was, but like I didn't know. So like having that community of like, yeah, you're like, that's normal, or I understand what you're going through. And so being open to talk about like, like, let's talk about our bodies. Let's talk about what we're going through hormonally. But I think also, like, there's times where I literally, like, I'm just in a horrible mood, or I'm, like, grumpy, or I'm not loving people well. And so, like,
what do you do about that?
It's really hard for me to get out of my head there. But I think, like, there's a part of me that knows. Like, I know what I'm being, like, how I am. And I've had friends be like, hey, like, what's going on? And I'm like, honestly, I'm just hormonal. Like, I think I'm PMSing. And like, I just feel kind of out of control. They'll be like, yeah, that's understandable. Like, why don't you, like, let's talk about it, or why don't you go home and rest? And I think that, like, that having those people who see you and understand you and love you through that in times of like, I'm out of control, or like, I don't know why I'm feeling these ways, like, that's so important. So like, not only being that for other people, but having those people in your life. Yeah. It's been life-changing for me. And I think, like, in terms of, like, what do you do when you're feeling like that? Like, I think number one, recognizing it. But here's the thing, recognizing it doesn't change it for me. Like, I'll be like, I know that I'm hormonal. I know that I'm having a hormone shift, and that's why I'm feeling all of the, like, irritable, and I'm feeling, all these things. And I'll know that, and I'll get so frustrated because it doesn't help me feel better.
Yeah.
So what I've learned is, like, if I'm in a situation, like, for example, like, I don't know, I'm talking to my fiance, but he's just for some reason getting on my nerves. He's doing nothing wrong because I'm hormonal. Like, I'm just like, what is wrong with you?
Man.
I'll just be like, hey, I'll explain to him, like, listen, I need to take a step back because I'm feeling some type of way. Like, I know that it's not because of you. I know that, but it's not going away. So like, I'm just going to go, take a shower. I'm going to go like do something relaxing, or like a lot of times I'll just be like, hey, can you pray for me?
Yeah.
Like, will you pray over me right now? Like, I don't know what else to do. And like, there's been so many times where he's like, okay. And he's prayed for me. And then like afterwards I'm like, okay, I can, like, I go back to that piece of like, okay, Jesus is here. Like he's the loving God. Like I go back to like being filled with the Spirit and what the fruits of the Spirit are. And it's love and joy and peace and all those good things. Like, those are what I connect back to. Yeah. So like, when my body's betraying me, like, God's still there. His Spirit's still there.
Yes,
so being able
unchanging.
He's unchanging. So like, pausing and being like, okay, I'm recognizing this. It's not necessarily going to change it, but like, how can I channel all of these feelings back to the Lord? How can I channel all of these feelings in a way that's not going to, hurt the people around me or hurt myself? That's just been something that it does take self-control, and you don't lose your self-control. I want to say that when you're feeling hormonal, that deep sense of self-control, it's not completely gone, but I can't change my feelings, but I can change what I do with them.
Yeah.
So I think that's like an important thing that I've had to learn how to do.
Okay. Hot take. I don't know if you were about to say anything, but hot take. Let's bring males into this mix because, and I'm saying this because I know your husband and he's very gentle and very patient. And so I feel like I can say this, but, and I know that as well about my husband, but we were talking about people who are like in your corner. And I think that we need to give men credit for being attached to us in these times, because a lot of times it's frustrating to be on the receiving end of someone's PMS. And but I think that it is true to have a voice in your life that you trust. And for me, that has been my husband through this, hormonal figuring out what's my base, like what's my foundation. And I remember him one time saying to me early on in our marriage, just because you're PMSing doesn't mean that you can like rage on anybody around you. And I remember thinking, my first thought, especially since I was PMSing, was you have no clue.
How dare
so
you?
just yeah, and I wanted to be like, I just like you don't even know. You don't even know that you're telling me that you can have self-control over these. I'm just going to give them to you and you see how you react, you know? And that was like, that's selfish and that's like very defensive. But I think what I've always remembered, even through like having kids, because transparent moment, on my way to church this Sunday, I mean, I like was starting my period and I was waking up my kids, and we get up here kind of early, so like bless them. But I was waking them up and I'm still getting ready, and I am like hearing them getting ready. So I'm like assuming they're all awake. Well, my oldest wasn't awake, and I walked into his room and I about lost it. I was like, get out of bed, blah, 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 blah. And then like the other two were doing fine. But I saw like just red, and I'm like, blah, 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 and orders that coming out left and right. And I'm driving to church and I'm like, God, this is funny. I'm driving to church and I'm raging on the kids. But it really, I really did, in hindsight, I did not like realize it then. Isn't that funny how like we can like be going through PMS, but not really connect the dots that it was PMS the way that we acted until like a week later.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just forget. And so I did have to go back in that instance and say like, I'm really sorry. That wasn't an appropriate way to respond to you guys. Like, I know that you're having to get up early, whatever. But I think it's important, especially those who are close in our life, like fiance or husbands or even close friends, to listen to what they're saying and at least give it a listen and run it through your filters, run it past God. Like, is this true? Is this something I can control? And if I can, then I need you to help me because I don't see how I can control these urges.
Maybe this is like a little bit of a hot take, and maybe not everyone would agree, but I think that looking at it from the standpoint of like God created me and he chose for like my spirit to be a woman. Like I'm a woman. He chose me to be that, and that's how he wanted to use me, and that's who he wanted me to be. And so to be and he knows me, to be that is an honor and a privilege, like to be a woman of God and to just have access to him in not in ways that other people don't, but it's like my relationship and my closeness with him is unique because I'm who I am and because of the way he made me. And so I feel like, and this is not at all to say that hormonal disruptions like don't ever need like medical care or medication. I'll be the first one to say that after I had my first baby, I should have been medicated. I should have been medicated. I didn't know any better.
I feel like there's a lot of us who probably think back now.
Yeah. So there's definitely a need and a time and a space for those things. But I think that if you can look at it from the stance of like, wow, I'm honored to be a woman. I'm honored for the role, to have the role that I have in this life, to be able to be a mother and a wife and raise kids and teach and be a caretaker and even be able to learn and be powerful. Having hormones can be something that you can look and like, you know, hormonal disruptions, weird things that you don't know what's going on, can really give you a chance to become more disciplined. Because if you can look at it as like, I'm honored to be like who I was created to be, and like I want to be used the way that God wants me to be used, and this is the way he made me. Your hormones and like the strange things that might be going on should be able to drive you back to him and just believe that he's steadfast and that he's the solid rock, even when you aren't sure about what might be going on inside of your body. It's like you can just rely on him deeper. And for me personally, like during my hormonal imbalances and changes, like my faith got super strong during those times, because like you mentioned earlier, hormones can kind of put blinders on you and cause you to have tunnel vision. Well, for my like experience with postpartum depression after my first one, after my first baby, I had this false sense of reality that I didn't know was false. So, I mean, I literally felt
like
crazy.
Building like a house of cards.
Yes. And so during that time of my life, like who God is was the least visible to me, like visible and tangible. And so I had to choose to believe just with my mind in what he says and like what he says to be true. So that was probably the deepest and the darkest point in my life where I had to choose to have faith. So I feel like those times in my life have been, I'm grateful for them. I'm grateful that the outcome was the way that it was, and that, you know, despite me not seeking out the help that I probably needed, God had grace for me and carried me through. And I'm super grateful for the things that I learned during those times.
Yeah. Now that you say that, I love that, because the biggest faith growth in my life so far has probably been in those years. I mean, like I have kids, like my bookends are 7 years and 7, 5. I don't know. I forget, because I'm 7 years from my youngest brother. So let's see, 3 and 5. No, 5 years. But then, like, on the outside of that, you're pregnant and then you're nursing afterwards. So probably a span of 7 years. Those are the 7 years that I probably grew the most in my faith, because, like we were saying earlier, like God being unshakable. I mean, his attribute is being unshakable and being faithful and never changing. Right. And there was, I mean, when push comes to shove, you get to a certain point where you're like, I need something that's not moving, because I'm always moving. My feelings are always moving. My circumstances are always moving, and I need something or someone to be a rock.
Yeah,
and
that's really good.
It's, I mean, like when we talk, like when you hear people talk about God being your anchor, I mean, think about what an anchor does to like a ship amongst tumultuous waves, holds them in one place, right? And so I think ultimately Jesus is our anchor. And when things seem so out of control around us, the only thing that will keep us tethered to him is something strong and immovable, right? But I think, so let's share a few, I mean, like practical things. I mean, like, I think this is an amazing, I'm always amazed at the conversations that ends up coming out of the topics that we're throwing out. But give some light into some practical steps, because women listening to this are going to be all over the spectrum, from, you know, soon after starting their period to dealing with post-menopause or pre-menopause. I mean, like just everywhere in between, based on where you stand right now, where I stand right now, where you stand right now. What are some very practical insights or things that people can begin to do or ask themselves questions in order to bring some order to the chaos?
Yeah. Well, like I said, I did not do things right after I had my first baby. I didn't know that anything was wrong, but it was very clear that something was wrong. And I didn't really have that like close-knit church community at all. I really didn't even know who I was yet. I had her so young. I didn't know who I was. So I didn't even know how abnormal things were, because I didn't know what my normal was.
Right.
So I think, again, if I can just like touch on that too, is just having that community and having people that know you, and like, it's really hard to get there because you have to be vulnerable. Right. And you have to be willing to be seen in like the deepest places and like the darkest places of your life.
That's hard.
It's so hard. But having those people who like will also be vulnerable enough in like an attempt to not upset you and come to you and say like, whatever you're going through right now, it's not normal. It's not healthy. Like I love you. So I really want to help you get the help that you need with this. So like, I didn't really have that. And then the places that I was struggling with at that point in my life were it was like all unseen. It was at home. I didn't even leave the house. I mean, I had like severe depression. I was paranoid. I was hallucinating. I literally saw people and heard people in my house. I thought everyone was trying to take my child. I was like it was bad. And I didn't know. I was like, this must be what being a mom is like. Now I'm protective. I didn't know. Yeah.
Wow.
And I didn't have anyone coming in. I stayed home because I didn't want someone to take my baby.
I remember the first time that you and I got together, we went to a park and there was a guy walking around, like just walking on the track, and you had your eye on him the whole time. And I remember you saying that for that very first time, you were like, I realized after I had my first that I was paranoid and I'm still working through that. And that was, how old was Sophia?
I don't know.
Probably
maybe
3.
Maybe 3. Because I had Selah when she was, 2? Maybe 3. I don't know. But I was also hurt in the past. And so I think a lot of that came back to life where I was like, I will not let this happen to my child.
Right.
But so I think definitely let yourself be seen. I stayed inside and I didn't go anywhere.
Well, imagine what today's society does to us, like with Instagram and the feeling that we need to have things together and have a bow wrapped around it and like have dreams and goals and ambitions. And really what you're doing half the time is just trying to keep your head above water, right? So there is a societal pressure on especially new moms and like people who are just starting out family or getting engaged and being married and starting these big life transitions to already feel like I can't let people see how bad it is.
Yeah. I think one other thing too is just to understand that like, and remember that God created rest and he gives us the chance to do that as a gift and as like a blessing, and that it's okay to stop and rest. Like we're supposed to, we need it to function properly. And so if you are going through like a time where you're, like you said, Chloe, go home and take a nap. Like it's okay to rest. It's okay to slow down and pause. I think, at least from my experience, like becoming a Jesus follower meant like I've got things to do now. Like I've got to go. I've got to run. I got to move. I got to chase him and seek him and grow and learn. And that can be done like slowly. Like so I think if you have a relationship,
it can't be done correctly without the proper rest.
Yes, true. So I think just having grace for yourself, allowing yourself to take a pause and rest. And I think also taking that time helps you to be like introspective too, and even further learn about like what's going on. What do I need in this moment? So yeah, I would say community, sleep,
and rest and introspectiveness,
nourishment.
I know you threw out a few practical things, but do you have anything else?
Yeah, I think I just want to like double down on like the idea of having a Sabbath. Like that has been probably like one of the most life-changing like spiritual discipline shifts.
I feel like community and Sabbath / rest have always made their way into these episodes.
Oh yeah, like it's just so important. Like take a time in your week to like, and that will allow you like in the midst of maybe you're going through a really crazy hormonal week to like, you know, reset and like have some time with the Lord and like have that day of rest. But like also balance that. Yeah, don't isolate yourself. Like go be in the places, do the things. Like don't let like your hormones keep you from living life in community. But I think like for me, honestly, like having a steady like everyday schedule helps so much, because like when my hormones are like this, knowing like I'm gonna wake up and be in the Word and pray and listen to worship music, like that will be my constant. That will be like my I will do that no matter what. Like that helps me so much. Have like that is my grounding force of like I know I'm gonna have my time with the Lord. So like don't give up on having a regular daily devotion. Like don't give up on those things because you're feeling, you know, I've struggled with depression, anxiety, all just around my menstrual cycle, and that like that can make it really hard. But just make a choice. Like I will wake up, you know, even if like I don't want to get out of bed that day, I will bring my Bible to my bed. Like that's what I'll do. And like having that, and also just like very practical, like moving your body, like getting exercise, eating things, like Sarah hit on this, like eating things that are going to like help balance your hormones. And there's so much research.
Yeah, go look it up. I mean,
like certain things can help during different times.
There's
in your
products that we use, like beauty products that we use that can cause hormone disruption. There's house cleaners that we use that can cause hormone disruption. There's air. I mean, literally,
so
we breathe in air that probably disrupts our hormones. Like you said, food and diet. There's a whole host of research on that.
And I think like you're not going to be perfect. Like I definitely don't like everything I eat is so clean and never is
it's
bad
organic
for me. Like,
and
you know, but like I'll just be like, you know, today like okay, I even like I'm on my period, I feel like eating junk food, I feel like doing that, but like I know that's not going to like that's not going to support my body and what it's going through. And like yeah, I'll have my piece of chocolate, I'll have the chocolate cake, but I'm also going to make sure I'm like, again, like you need more iron because you're losing iron, like different things.
Water.
Yeah, like give your body what it needs to survive, because we're holistic beings. Like it's not just, oh, I need my spiritual wellness, I need like you need all of it.
I
so
love that you said that.
Yeah.
just like make sure you're taking care of yourself. And like even like I'll literally be like, hey Alex, can you make a healthy dinner? Because honestly, if not, I'm going to eat a bag of potato chips for dinner. And he'll be like,
I'm telling you, I'm threatening you, I'm going to eat a bag of potato chips.
I'm like, that's what I'm feeling. And, you know, like that will be.
So please help.
Yeah.
I love, like, you have said multiple times, the theme that I've seen you say is like reaching out for help. And I love that you do that, because there's a lot of times, and I think it stems back from like not wanting to be vulnerable, or like not wanting people to see our mess. But even with the very close individuals in our lives, asking for help, whether that's prayer or like, yeah, I need dinner tonight, or like, I'm struggling to like feel normal. Do you have a second to chat or go to coffee or whatever? And another thing I want to say is, like, you talked about Sabbath. And so many times, like, because I remember, like, when I really started digging deep into knowing what is Sabbath, what does it look like for me, I had little kids. And so I'm like, yeah, right. Am I ever going to get a Sabbath? No. But that's not true. Because there's different ways that you can organize that. I mean, like, a very black and white way would be get a babysitter. And if you have means to do so, and get away for a second and rest and contemplate and think and journal or whatever. Or even within your house. I mean, like, I did this with my kids, and I know that there's a lot of guilt that can be centered around this, but like, I was like, watch a show, like play your iPad, watch a show. I don't care. I am peacing out for like 30 minutes. Or like putting a toy in front of them and knowing like you have this toy, like stations or whatever. So that's just a little bit of an insight to Sabbath, because there was a point where I was like, there's no way I'm going to have a Sabbath. But I also loved what you said about the holistic care. We're holistic beings. And so it's more just about our spiritual health or emotional health or mental health, physical health. It really works in tandem together. And I think from my personal experience with hormones and dealing with them was, I think it's important that you ask good questions, that you ask questions nonetheless. They don't have to even be good. Ask questions. And whether that is to the internet, like Google, I mean, of course, be careful about Google, because we all know Dr. Google is not the best. But it can begin a conversation in your head of like, could it be that what I'm feeling right now has something to do with my hormones, and that I could do something about it? Because at one point I got curious enough to start asking questions, and I went to medical professionals. And I remember after my third child, to my knowledge, I was done having kids. And so I said, what do I need to do birth control wise? And she recommended an IUD. So I was like, great. That means I'm not going to have a period. I don't even have to worry about it. It levels my estrogen, everything. So I had my IUD for a good like 2 years, and felt pretty leveled out for a while, and then just hit a wall of like, I'm not feeling normal. I'm having really bad headaches. I'm getting migraines. I've never had migraines in my life before. I'm experiencing these things. I'm really moody. I don't have a period. That was one thing that I was like, could it be that I was made a certain way to have a period as a cycle that cleans out like my insides, and like, you know, I started asking questions of like, there's a cycle, and it's there for a reason, and I don't have mine. Could it be that's the way I'm feeling the way I am? Yeah. And so started asking questions. I like started actually seeking out a nutritional specialist, and also a chiropractor who had years of experience of pairing holistic health with nutrition. And he was a wealth of knowledge, and it was something that my family and I had to consider, because we were up against a medical issue with one of our children as well. So it was kind of me and him, and we felt like we got to all the dead ends with the medical field. So I felt like we needed to explore outside, and that led us to him. And it was really a godsend at that moment. And I'm very aware that sometimes that's not for people, because, you know, sometimes you get, you know, made fun of because you're crunchy granola or whatever. But I'm okay with that. I feel like I always tell people I have 1 foot in the medical field and 1 foot in the crunchy field, because that has been what has worked for me. And but I literally remember going to him and saying, I need you to fix my hormones. And he had asked lots of questions about my past and how long I've been breastfeeding, how long had I been pregnant, been doing the whole kid deal. And I said, I think I'm just done with kids. I'm not breastfeeding. I'm like 2 years out and I need to find my new normal. And I told him I had an IUD, and he said, here's some facts about an IUD. You need to make the choice of whether or not you're going to keep it. And after talking with my husband and really considering lots of options, I was like, I'm going off of all birth control whatsoever, because that's just what I feel convicted I need to do. And conviction, let's not be confused. Conviction is a personal thing. It's not a like communal thing. Yeah. Just because I went off of it doesn't mean that you need to go off of it. And so I went through that and got the IUD taken out, had some complications with that. So that was really fun. And then very slowly and surely adjusted my diet, began to exercise, and my hormones are they're most in line than they've ever been before. And every once in a while they start getting a little out of whack, and I'll go back to my chiropractor and say, what are you seeing? This is my diet. This is what I'm doing. And he'll give me supplements to kind of regulate some of my minerals, because we didn't talk about minerals, but minerals is really important. Minerals are really important with the processes of your body. So all that to say, asking questions, because I never would have got there. I felt a little crazy along the way. Because of the medical issues that it was scary asking my doctor, well, why don't I have a cycle? Is that not weird to you? And to her, it wasn't, because that's her field. And she said, people do this all the time. And my question was, well, do I have to do it all the time? And is there another way? And you started talking about like monitoring your periods, and I started taking my temperature, and that was a wealth of knowledge just about myself. Is every morning waking up, taking my temperature, recording it, and seeing these like graphs going up and down, and it clicking for me like this has everything to do with my hormones. So all that to say, asking good questions is another good practical step, whether that's for you, for a medical professional, or anybody outside of the medical field. Just really important to know your body, back to self-awareness, being self-aware of your body. But
yeah, I think they might feel tricky and confusing at any given point in life, literally every day sometimes for people.
Yes.
But I think, just going back to remembering that God made us this way, and that he gave us our hormones so that our bodies can function and populate the earth. And that he's given us that, but he's also like given us the ability to create. So we have doctors that are able to, push forward with science and medical changes, and like there's medication that's available, there's research that's been done, and then like there's all sorts of people around us that God has also gifted to help kind of like forge the way into like understanding why we are this way. So with a little bit of question asking and curiosity, there's a lot of like chance to kind of like take what we've been given and turn it into like what works for us.
A lot of it is trial by error too, and which can be a little frustrating along the way, because like you come to a dead end and you're like, I thought that was the answer, or I thought asking my OBGYN would be a one time like, oh, here's the fix. And then you do that, and then you end up, I remember going on birth control and being like, I want something that's not going to make me crazy, and 2 months later I ended up changing it because I was literally psycho.
Yes.
Same
thing.
You were talking about Alex and saying that like, being a little crazy. I remember getting on birth control, and I didn't understand like the tricycline low, the high, the low, whatever.
Yeah,
and I was like, that one sounds great. And I remember like breaking up with Trey, me like, I don't really like you anymore. And can you go home? And he did. And then I called him back later. I'm like, I didn't mean that. I think I'm crazy right now. I need to get off this birth control. And then we changed and figured out, oh, okay.
That's it's crazy. Like I've read and seen all these different things. Like girls get on birth control and they're no longer attracted to the person they're with. Like all these, there's so many different things that go into it. And I think it's just important. Like I've gone through a journey too of like, I thought my doctor said birth control would help regulate my cycle when I was like still a teenager. So I like went on it not knowing what was going to happen. And then I was like a zombie for 3 months. And then I was like, oh wait, this is what, like, that's not like, so then I learned how to do it naturally. And I think there's just a balance of like, how do I find what works for me? How do I use the resources that are in this world? But then also, like, at the end of the day, like, there's so much grace around it. Like, I don't have everything figured out.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not like, I'm a master of my hormones, guys. Like, I never
Hormone
have
master.
Yeah, like, I don't have PMS outbreaks ever. Like, there's no, like, I'm still, you know, and I'm sure, like, once I go into having kids and all of that, like, it's just going to be a whole
It's going to change again. That's the thing about hormones is you feel like you get them under control and then something changes.
Yeah.
I mean, because I'm pushing 40 and I feel like I just got out of my like childbearing time of life and I'm probably going to be entering in premenopause pretty soon. I mean, like, wild to think about.
Yeah. I'm at the point where I'm like, do I want another baby or do I want to do that again? Because it was horrible for me.
Well, yeah, you look back
in some
and
senses, but
yeah.
And I think although of course we are all women and we're all built to function in a very similar way to each other, I suppose. We all are different. All of our bodies are different too. And so just, I think that honestly also comes with age and experience. The more cycles you have, the more,
more
in touch
repetitions
with how your body works.
Yeah.
And so, I think just leaning into like listening to your body and, making sure you have like a good, grasp on like what God sounds like to you, because that gut feeling, sometimes you might go to a doctor and they tell you need this or that. And then you're like, I just don't think that's right for me. Knowing your body, knowing like how to listen to God and how to seek his voice and his feelings about something in your life is important. So.
Yeah. We're glad that you joined us today. We will see you next week.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to sign up for the Inspired Conference on April 27th. If you ever have any questions, you can email us at inspired@thex.church.